You're all set. Have a good night, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you,
you.
Tina. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our June 24th meeting of the Charter Review Committee. I see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members exactly, and 1 attendee. So if we lose anyone, we will unfortunately have to cut the meeting short. Yes, Ken.
A quick note on that. I will not disappear, but I will disappear for a couple seconds as I move to my phone, and I'll be on my phone starting at 6:30 for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. No problem at all. And yeah, so I will quickly start off the meeting where it's being held via remote means, which is allowed. And I guess I'll start us off with minutes. I have not gotten Meg's minutes yet, but Bernie, thank you for sending me the minutes. Did everyone?
Okay, Jillian, you need to call us by name and make sure that we can.
Thank you.
Heard. Yeah, that's
perfect.
It's up top in the requirements.
Ken?
Aye.
Hi, Raphael.
Here.
Bernie.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Erica.
Here.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for the reminder. And basically, we will now, did everyone get a chance to review the minutes? If not, we can hold off. Okay, great. Then I'll move to approve our July 10th set of minutes. Thank you, Bernie. And Meg has not sent the June 26th minutes yet, so we're still waiting on those. Looking for a second.
Second.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ken?
Yep. Sorry. Yes, aye.
Great. Myself, I'm an aye. Raphael?
Aye.
Bernie?
I have to abstain.
Okay. Erica?
Aye.
Great. Thank you. That passes with 1 abstention. And we will now move on to public comment. Does anyone in the public have a comment? If you would like to speak. No? Just raise your hand or press *9 on Zoom. Nope. Okay. Hi, Andy. How are you? Can you hear and be heard?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. We just approved the minutes for July 10th. Meg hasn't sent the June 26 minutes, and we just finished up public comment. Nobody spoke, so I'll move us along to the outreach subcommittee update. Erica, do you want to make that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I can report that we had our last of the 4 scheduled listening sessions last night at the Bangs Community Center. Meg and Raphael and I, as the outreach subcommittee, were present. Julian was also there. We had a good number of people for a discussion. We took notes by hand. We heard lots of interesting comments and some overlap with things we've already heard in other places. We'll be compiling our notes. We're meeting again as a subcommittee next week. And we'll be talking about kind of how this went and what we, if and when and how we might do additional outreach activities. The town official and staff survey is still out in the field. But we had set a deadline of mid-July. But because of the number of responses and because we had asked the communications office to do a kind of big reminder email before the deadline, but that didn't happen, I decided to extend the deadline and request that the communications office do another big push. So we've seen some more come in, and I'll be sort of, so that the feedback subcommittee can sort of begin to do their work before the July 31st survey deadline. I'm going to compile what we have so far and send it to Andy so that they can have a look and maybe start doing a preliminary pass on that. I think that's all I have. Raphael, did I miss anything critical?
No, I'm looking forward to meeting with the subcommittee next week. It's good to have a sense of how things went with those listening sessions. It'll be good to consider whether or not how we do a little more in terms of like thinking about who was there. I think we had one listening session where someone said, I'm paraphrasing here, maybe a push to connect to more diverse folks in the community. It would be good to sort of grapple with that as a subcommittee. But as you shared, there's some themes that emerged in those listening sessions. I think people who attended seem to appreciate having a chance to share in that format. So it's good to be at all of them and hear from folks.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the town official survey, we should talk a little more about that. Maybe just checking in with folks, maybe follow-up email, just letting them know what we plan to do with it in terms of like some stuff about is reminding folks anonymous, just trying to grapple with that as a subcommittee next week. I think there's some who might be a little wary of that element when it comes to that survey.
Can I ask about how many of the elected officials responded? Do you have that number in your?
We have about 20 responses.
Okay, and that's from the elected officials,
That's
Or-
elected, if that's any elected officials or staff.
staff, okay.
It's a,
So
it's a
that's
big,
really,
it's a big list that the communications office
Yeah.
do.
that's a really disappointing return.
It is
How many responses?
about 20
From elected officials
elected officials and staff.
and staff. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
What was
Got
the
And
what was
we
the
did
total
send,
what was the total number that we were sent it out to?
it was about 370.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
So I'm happy to talk about that. It's on our agenda for the subcommittee to talk about as well. But yeah, I think all of us would have hoped for a greater response rate.
300 and I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
370. That's I mean, how many counselors have we had? And
It includes counselors, and former counselors, but also all of the town offices, the school committee people, the firefighters, the police, I can pull up the list. I don't have it in front of me, but she sent me, Sam in the communications office sent me a kind of summary of all those departments and the count, and the total number of actual people was about 370.
Wow.
And we sent, because they don't maintain their own list of the former counselors, I sent that out myself as opposed to coming directly from their office.
Interesting. So that was, just to clarify, former counselors, current counselors, school committee, library trustees, current, and then all town staff from the town manager to like a firefighter.
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
I can read through the categories. That's helpful for people to know.
Sure. Why not?
Town manager's office, town council members, Jones Library trustees, libraries, libraries staff, public works, bank center, town hall, fire, police, and 3 other individuals that didn't fall neatly into one of those categories.
Okay. Wow. That's really interesting, especially given how many staff. Did we remind me, did we required people put names and stuff on there, right?
We did not require it. We had a clear statement of, we were requesting names.
Yeah.
And that their names wouldn't be attached to any printed reports that that we deliver or create or complete as a committee. They also had the option to submit written comments. In other words, if you prefer not to do a form, but to submit your written comments, you can also do that. I have not checked if there's been an uptick in
Yeah.
the written comments form since we did this push. But that would be interesting to know too, because maybe people are selecting to just skip the survey and kind of just write a comment and submit it that way.
Ken?
How many times did you annoy them? And meaning, follow up with them?
2.
Wow,
Huh.
wow. Okay.
Interesting.
And I have the cooperation of the communications office to do another big push, sort of like a couple of days, let's say, before the deadline that we've set. I didn't want to overkill it, but it is summer. It's a challenge. It's been a challenge for our listening sessions as well. There's a lot of distractions. So, as a group, we can make a decision to extend our deadline. We had set a deadline, just a reminder to get us back on the same page. Like, we had set a deadline so that the feedback committee could start doing their work to compile and compare and sort of do some data analysis kind of against what's being collected in other means. There's no reason why that can't continue, right? We can keep that survey out there. Having set the deadline, maybe request another push and have I can compile what we've received at deadline time and deliver it to you all. And the work can continue. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I would also think that as we, either the feedback committee or the committee of the whole, begins to assemble everything we have and categorize, if we then put that out as sort of draft 0, and give people the opportunity to react to that, that might prompt some more discussion. Because it'll focus people in on what others have said and what the committee thinks is actionable, at least our first take on it.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Thanks,
Raphael?
Raphael.
Yeah, Erica, others, it would be good to take up like an approach to deal with some of the things that I've heard about why not submit. I won't talk about it here, but there are a number of reasons why people feel hesitant, that we could probably grapple with more. And some of it sort of connects to some of the things that we heard in the listening tour.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to other approaches or tinkering with what we've got. As I said, the anonymity question is an important one, and I have definitely seen in the responses so far a couple of people who have just opted not to include their name, and so anyway, just to be clear, by the time this committee meets again, the deadline will have passed. The subcommittee on outreach is meeting next Wednesday, which is a day before the stated deadline. So I will be reaching out to the communications office for an additional bump if I can get that support from them. But I don't know if the idea, so I floated the idea of extending the deadline again or just leaving it open past the date that we set. And I don't know if people want to officially opine about that or wait till we see what happens in the next 7 days and I can report out in 2 weeks.
Raphael and then Ken?
Yeah, I would vote to keep it open. And in addition to like talking about that here, it would be great to hear from other folks on the committee, just ideas about how to make that second push, whatever it might look like, or additional push.
Yeah. Ken?
I don't think this is in opposition to what Raphael just said, but keep the link open, keep the survey open, but I think keeping on the deadline is also really important for our work to move forward, as long as we're not waiting around and the feedback subcommittee can fold some of those latecomers in. I don't want to get hung up by further delays at the same time. I hope we can do both. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The last question was, Just going really back to the public input session yesterday, how was the attendance there?
I think there was like 8 people, 9 people.
We had 10. We had 10.
And
There were 10 attendees.
In addition to all y'all?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
what was the most we had?
On
Is this-
Zoom, I can't remember the number.
On Zoom, I think we had 12.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I completely agree, Ken. I think you put that very well, that it makes sense to me to keep it open. But it shouldn't be a excuse or a reason that we can't move forward, or can't keep working with actual review of the documents. I think that was well put. Any other questions on this?
One last thing, as it's just a technical question for, I guess, Andy. I'm planning to send you basically a spreadsheet that is the contents of what we've got so far. And I hope that that works for you all.
Mhm.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Okay, so moving us along, the feedback subcommittee, you all have an update.
We are meeting on Tuesday, the 29th. And I reached out to Erica and as she said, she's going to send us what she has from the survey. And I reached out to Athena to make sure that we have the latest submissions from the link on our website, the feedback form. And Bernie has also gone through all of our meetings to make sure that we're capturing all of the ideas that were raised during public comment. So we're at the point now where I think we want to start, just pulling together the various ideas and putting them in a format that we can then, as a committee, start to use our judgment on. So that's our goal for Monday, is to putting those responses in one place,
Okay,
so that we can all look at them.
thank you. Any questions on that? No. Awesome. All right, so I'll move us along. I was gonna give an open meeting law reminder, but upon further consideration, there really was just one email that was an issue. And I'll take that up with the individual who sent it. For our next discussion, is report writing. I was wondering how this committee, we owe 3 reports to the town council, and eventually we'll need to get started on writing the preliminary report sometime in the next few months. And I was wondering how this committee wanted to approach that, sort of more as a high level discussion, to say, do we want to delegate the report writing to individuals and sort of break it up in different sections that different people volunteer to write, or do we want to have a committee work on it? Do we want to task a team of 2 or 3 people to work on it, outside of, like, not a subcommittee, just like 2 people who are interested, etc. Like, how do we want to approach that? Obviously, no matter what happens, it will be shared to the full group when the report's ready, and we will pick it apart, so to speak, as is our job. But how do folks feel about that? Andy?
Yeah, I think it was the meeting before last, we brought forward an example from Framingham that was like a chart that sort of showed, side by side, what the current language is and what the suggested change was by section. And I think there was a fair amount of interest in that kind of approach to at least pulling together our ideas, and that combined with a redlined copy of the charter to show what the changes would look like might comprise our report.
I agree.
And so, I think I think we should, as a committee, be thinking together about what goes in that chart. And so I think our hope, I think, on the feedback subcommittee is to do an initial organization of all the stuff we've heard so that it's organized by article. But then it's going to be up to us, I think, to sort of, discuss discuss each of those and figure out which ones, should go forward and vote on that as a committee. So.
Excellent.
And the writing up, I think we can, hopefully we put it in a format that then can be distilled down and maybe it won't be too onerous.
Okay. And then we as a committee can sort of review, and actually like different committee members can volunteer to do that. Writing in, of what we agreed to. It may even be something, at least in my mind, that might be worth scheduling a retreat to discuss or do. Erica?
Yeah, I think that, Andy, the idea that you are putting forward makes a lot of sense to me, and that especially for the first draft, that it is coming directly from the feedback, and however it is being organized by the subcommittee. I had two questions. One is, have we devised a kind of revised set of dates for our, or like target deadlines for our writing or reporting process? Because it would be good to have those in mind as we enter this phase of the work. And the other question is it's just a process question. Is the dividing up of the work possible outside of subcommittees, given the problem of deliberating outside of our public meetings?
If it's just two people, that's okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but it looks like Marcus is in. He's raising his hand. He's in the way. He's in with the attendees.
Oh,
There
okay.
is a Marcus
There it
thing.
is.
Let me promote him to panelist. Thank you. Yeah. Excellent. He's been promoted to panelist. And I think that's an excellent suggestion to sort of work with that, Erica. I think that's well put. Raphael, did you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Julian, the idea of having a sort of a longer session, a retreat or whatever. And I think that might be what we might need as we have, a long list of things that we're considering. And I think we're going to need to spend some time together to sort of work those through and figure out what we actually want to put forward. And so maybe it would be good to look at, a Saturday or a Sunday if we could, spend, 4 or 5 hours together to be just trying to plow through the list. So rather than, get a little bit done in a night meeting and then put it off for another, it just might be a decision making or an idea sorting meeting together might be very powerful.
I completely agree. And I also think that it would be great. I could send out, or someone could send out sort of a doodle poll to try to get that scheduled in the near future. So I think a retreat would be important. I will call on Ken, then Raphael, then Erica, but first I want to make sure that Marcus can hear us and be heard.
Hello. Yes, I am here.
Excellent.
hear you.
Thank you. And now we don't need to worry about a quorum. So thank you, Marcus. And we are in the middle of discussing report writing and a possible retreat and how we're processing that. So Ken.
I wanted to say I also like the idea of a retreat, of a focused, longer gathering. And I don't want to get off topic of that, but I just had a quick question about where does the interim report go? Does it go to the council and then do we wait for their feedback? Or are we simply just submitting it and we're continuing our work? I really don't want to, I would love for us to be able to move forward and not wait around for some sort of feedback loop or something.
The answer is yes, it goes to the town council and we will meet with them at some point to basically submit that report and answer questions and have a discussion at one of their meetings. And we can then continue with our process and not be held up by that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Raphael?
In the charge, it's good for us to be clear about like timeline for us. There's an initial report that we need to do. It notes. There's also a preliminary report. That preliminary report has to be shared in a public forum. And then there's a final report. So it'd be good for us to be clear about like our working timeline, if we could spend some time sort of working that out.
Erica, and then Bernie, do you still have a question?
All set, thanks.
Yeah, so to this point about like what is our process going to be, I think let's add it to our agenda perhaps for our next meeting to really come up with a calendar for some of this and to put dates in for a possible retreat or for reporting date, for a public forum, to contemplate the idea that perhaps at some point in the fall we might have to change our meeting pace. As an example, if we can't get it all done in a retreat, then we might have to, briefly meet every week for 90 minutes for a short period of time. The outreach subcommittee, for instance, will be in a different mode at that point. So I don't know, maybe it becomes possible. I'm just floating ideas, but if we could make it a solid agenda item so that we can have a calendar up and lock some things in would be good, I think. You're muted, Julia, if you're talking.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I agree. Thank you, Erica. Andy, I was going to call on next.
Yeah, I think as part of that, looking at the charge and looking at the interim report, or the preliminary report, those are opportunities to get feedback, to give people something to chew on and give us feedback on based on what we're putting forward. So we might get some interest in that. I think we should build in, some way of, putting out a press release, highlighting what we're proposing initially, where people can see it and how people can give us feedback. So I think that would be, in some ways, it's easier for people to give feedback if they have something to give feedback on rather than just like, oh, what do you think about the charter? So maybe we should build that in, I think.
Yeah, I like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. And we'll definitely put that on the next agenda. For that, Erica. Marcus.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing to potentially include, like in the initial report, is like a scope of what we can do. I've seen a lot of comments around about what we should do, but that's not necessarily within scope. So, I think, we had a couple of, during our listening sessions, we had some great sort of points where we're taking all input, but we can only necessarily act on, this sort of area and push the rest to something else, or, just a scoping, I don't want to say a scoping document, scoping paragraph or something that just gives people some context as to what we're actually able to do.
Raphael?
I would also say in terms of like writing approach and ask, the final report has we have to write something about reasons for recommendations. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I would also say, like, not to completely disagree, but I think that it might be more helpful if we said how things we hear can be done. I understand there's some things that just can't be done, but rather than basically being the committee that says no, being a committee that says, here's how that could happen, or here's the route that we would have to take to achieve this public suggestion that we've been hearing a lot. And then let the town council and the community ponder that. Raphael?
Yeah, I think we've shared that there might be a subsection, I don't know who shared, things that we've learned that are outside of the charter that we might include that. But I think in terms of form and approach, retreat would be great to sort of grapple with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think centering like charter and changes without getting wrapped up in what we can't do as a big part of this could be tricky. I think as a footnote at the end, maybe, but to weave that in foregrounded, I think it's tricky, tough.
Erica?
I just wanted to ask for clarification about what remains available to us on our contract with Collins for the remaining work, like how, so that we can be thinking about in what ways and on what schedule we can bring them in to help us consult in various ways.
Yeah, so they still meet with myself, Andy, and anyone else who's interested, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. They still also email me and communicate with me pretty regularly, and they are available for some help with report writing, annotating articles, providing documents, research, etc. And they still have 2 full committee meetings with us that they will be attending towards the end of the process.
If there's, sorry for a follow-up, so if there's limits to, you know, how many hours or how many meetings they can be with us for the reporting set of questions that are inevitably going to come up, and then it would be good to know that in advance. If I understand they can still come to 2 more meetings, but if, like, we should maybe think about what's the best use case for having them present and what we want to do with them, given that we're going to have a lot of questions about how we report and what we report.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernie?
Yeah, the question is who's tracking time spent with Collins? Because I'm assuming that every time they, you know, I'm assuming it's whenever they pick up the phone, the clock starts and they start billing, or is it a much more informal arrangement?
So they track how many meetings they spend, and then they, as in committee meetings, and they build in support time to that.
Okay.
Whether that be support time being meeting with me, being on the phone with me, meeting with other committee members, doing research, sharing reports, etc.
Okay, I just would hope that there's some structure and that it might be helpful if we got as a document or as a report at each of our meetings, how much Collins time has been used and what's still available. The problem with allowing anybody to talk to Collins is everybody can talk to Collins, and we can't control. We just have to monitor carefully how much time we have left. So that as Erica was pointing out, we're going to need them to do some report writing. We're going to need them to support us at some public events, and we want to make sure that we're making the best use of that time possible.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, they have made that Pat has made herself available to, I think, Julian and to the chairs of the outreach and feedback subcommittees, you know, the Monday before our meetings, basically to say, you know, what do you need from us? And a lot of it's been preparing these sort of summaries of each of the articles that they've been doing. But I'm wondering if next time we talk to Pat, we should ask for, you know, a proposal from them of how they think their remaining time could best be used, and see what they tell us.
Yeah, we can definitely ask for that. Other questions about this before I move us on in the agenda? No. Seeing none. I will now screen share Article 8, and we will do what we did at the last meeting and the meeting before that. And I'm hoping that we'll have time to work through Article 9 and maybe the transition provision. But if we don't, we will end at 8 o'clock. Yeah, excellent. Can you all see this? Great. So I'll pretty much go through like some section by section in the article and ask for questions and comments and opinions and all that, and we can discuss any ideas or thoughts people have, what people have heard, and anything in red is comments that the Collins Center has added. Let me know if I'm going too quickly or slowly, and I'll try to save my comments till after some other folks have commented. And I can try to answer questions as well, since Collins has met with me.
Looking at 8.1, I'm trying to recall if anybody has used the petition process to call a meeting of the council. So I don't know that we can say that this has been used, abused. Interestingly enough, 200, it took 200, a petition from 200 registered voters to call a special town meeting. This is somewhat more generous because there can be any 200 residents over the age of 18 will have to be a registered voter. So that seems to me that this this provision, this open meeting provision, is
Didn't they call a meeting for the
yet to be tested.
library?
I believe that was a different section.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is really yet to be tested, and I think you know, going on precedence, getting 200 signatures from adults in the community is a little more generous than calling a special town meeting. So I don't see the need to change this or to it hasn't been, we haven't tried it, so you know, in the time that the charter's been in force. So
Other comments? I personally, yep.
This seems to relate to the section that we read, and I can't remember the article off the top of my head, about the article delineates certain public forums that are supposed to happen with regularity. And there's a relationship, I think, here with one of the questions that came up in that discussion is, are those actually happening on any kind of schedule that's predictable? And so this provision is for over and above those. And so there's a relationship, I think, between those two. Whatever gets responded to about the first piece relates to this piece as well, in my mind.
Yeah. The only other thing that I was going to say was here with, like, we haven't seen this used yet. However, 200 residents, the Collins Center sent me a list of some communities that require 150 residents, seemed like most of the norm. Some of those required 150 registered voters, not residents. But given that it hasn't been used, it might make sense to lower that to like 150, make the bar of entry a little bit lower. But that's just my experience. Consider the fact that every time here, some of the names get knocked off the list by the town clerk. So that means that signature collectors often need to collect more than actually 200 signatures. Raphael? You're muted.
Sorry about that.
Yep, still muted. You unmuted, but then you muted yourself again.
I muted myself again. So folks here, sorry about that. So folks here have shared this provision hasn't been used?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the move to Laura might be appealing to some in the community based on feedback we've gotten in terms of voice being heard. So it would be good to sort of consider that. The lowering.
Absolutely, I agree. Other comments, questions on this?
Well, I guess when we get to the next section, we're gonna want to ask ourselves, how much do we want to be consistent between the two?
Mhm.
This one is for calling an open meeting. The next one is a petition,
Mhm.
which requires action by the council. That calls for 150 registered voters,
Mhm.
because it compels the council to take action. This previous one just says, council hold a meeting. This is a way that people can, make sure that if they've got a burning issue, they can get in front of the council and have that discussion. So if we're gonna, I think we need to keep in mind the distinction between the open meeting, the call for an open meeting, the free petition call statute, and the initiative measures statute, all of which the latter two require some action on the part of the council. We also have to keep in mind, it's probably a good thing that it's telling that this hasn't been used. Because if you set that number too low, you invite a constant stream of special meetings.
Yeah, there's an element there though, Bernie, in terms of like the subject, not more than once over a 12-month period. I think if I'm thinking about rationale for shift, again, a theme that's emerging is folks want to be heard. They don't feel like that's the case. And not to unpack here, but I think that element in terms of I want my issues to be handled, addressed. I want to be heard more. I think I've heard that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I dare say there's probably not any government anywhere in Massachusetts where people wouldn't say the same thing. It's a really valid concern. I think what we need to do is sort out how people get heard. Is it a matter on an ongoing basis? Is it something that the council can do by changing their policy procedure? Or is it something that we need to embed in the charter? And then if we need to embed it in the charter, how do we do it in a reasonable way? So there's a difference between people want to be heard in my conversations with folks, which are by no means systematic. One big puzzle is who do I call? How do I call? So that's a question of civic education and advertising, so people know that if they've got a complaint about XYZ, that this is the department that they call into, and that doesn't require changing the charter, but it does require people to for us to give people a better understanding of how the town government works. So,
It'll be good to have more of this discussion once we look at more feedback, but I think
yeah,
something that it would be great to have on the table is a number. More to come, I guess.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is like currently, I believe you can only have these signatures for any of these provisions in writing on a piece of paper. I don't know, there's nothing in here that requires it be on a piece of paper. There's nothing in here that would not allow it to be electronic, but currently there's no way to do it electronically. And I feel like it might be a good idea to sort of add somewhere in here, clarify if we want to allow these signatures to be collected electronically, just for folks who might be out of town when a signature is being collected, or who canvassers might not have gotten to their door, are sick or elderly, and aren't out and about. I feel like it might be a little bit easier to allow these signatures to be held or done electronically. Erica?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what we're hearing has to do with transparency and responsiveness in various ways. And these are the provisions that have to do with how the public can solicit, the government for a response in various ways. There's not a lot of transparency or clarity in the communicativeness that's implied by a provision like this. There's the opportunity to do a petition, and then it says that if they meet certain conditions, the hearing will happen. But there's a lot that could be added to that to fill in some detail, or to add layers of communication in between, like Julian's point about electronic signatures versus written signatures. Like, what happens if the threshold is met, but the council has decided that it's already been addressed? What are the means of communication that come back to those petitioners, as an example? We don't need to spend any more time on this right now necessarily, but I think if the value is transparency and responsiveness, there's, I think, more to flesh out here, more kind of relief to be described.
Mhm.
No. Okay, I'll keep moving. Any comments on 8.2? Am I going too quickly for anybody? Okay. 8.3, comments, questions. I have quite a bit to say on this one.
Do we actually, Andy, do you remember why you had the difference between the two? 200 versus 250?
I don't actually. This was, it's sort of a cascade, or an increasing level of requirement, and so this is tiered. So to get it to the point where it's going to be acted upon. I don't know. Can you scroll up a little bit, Julian, or scroll back a little bit? Yeah, there. So in this one, you're basically asking for the full town to have a vote on something. So, it's requiring a slightly more higher number of signatures, because that's a heavier lift for the town. And then once the measure is determined to be something that actually the town council could act on, then it's requiring the town council to act, and then supplementarily, if in addition, you're basically getting enough additional voters to equal 5% of the total number to take it to the full town in an election. So it's compelling action by the town council, and then if the town council rejects it, there's the next layer of 5%. So, but the initial 250 is a higher bar just because it's a more serious approach, and you know, it's asking for a heavier lift by the town. Again, all of this stuff is within the context of the idea that you're hiring representatives to deliberate on your behalf. So, you know, the council is supposed to be responsible to the voters, and they're expected to, you know, understand the issues that they're voting on, and then, you know, in some way try to represent what their sense is of the town body as a whole, or their sense of what the most judicious way to go forward is. And so within that context, it's a pretty heavy thing to say, okay, we ask our representatives to vote on this, and they're the ones who have the you know, the approval of the town to be thinking about these issues and to be communicating with us on them. And then if we wanted to say, you aren't acting on this, and we want to compel you to act on it, then that's why these things exist. And then the voter veto is the most serious, where you're basically saying, we believe that you're not representing the town, and so we want to take it to the voters to see if they'll overturn a decision you've made. So each of these things need, you know, transparency, yes, but part of the transparency is having representatives that have to stand for election and represent the majority of, you know, their constituents. So,
Bernie?
Yeah, I think what section 8.3 and 8.4 do is basically reflect the process that's used on the state level for initiative measures and voter veto, except they're a little bit more generous in terms of the numbers that are required. I think, for example, in state law, there's varying percentages and varying times. This is much more straightforward and than what you might find on the state level, and also what's embedded in the state constitution. You know, this is I wouldn't look to affect changes in section 8.3 or section 8.4 because the Attorney General's already said that this is okay the way it is, and because it really does reflect what the state process is. And Andy's point is really well taken. I mean, we've moved to a representative government, and you know, a big part of that is having your counselors act on your behalf. So it does require a much heavier lift on the part of the town. But again, it reflects standard statewide practice.
Is that all? Great. So I have a few comments. The first one is that 5% of the voters for signatures, that doesn't completely make sense to me, because even if in other parts of the state 5% might make sense, we are a college town, and there is much larger turnout in federal elections than in local elections. You combine those trends of larger turnout that exist everywhere with the fact that we are a college town and get even higher amounts of increased turnout during those federal election years. I feel like it would make much more sense to have a set number that rather than 5%. And I feel like looking at some of the other towns across the state that do have a set number rather than 5%, a set number somewhere between 250 and 400 voters would make sense. And I feel as though having 5% is pretty arbitrary and sets a different standard each time, just basically luck of the draw of when the issue that a petitioner would like to petition to be placed on the ballot happens, you know? So I feel like having a set number here makes a lot of sense. My other concern with this section is I've heard people say, oh, it should be difficult but not impossible. In my mind, this is a check on the government. And we hear, you know, since 8th grade social studies, checks and balances are important. And I'm not an expert in this, but I feel like having a strong check on the actions of the council here by the voters that can be used when the voters feel is appropriate. Obviously, this isn't something that can happen every month. We don't want to allow that, but I feel like having a strong check that is usable by a concerned group of citizens is a healthy check on the town council. And yes, they also have the check that they can get voted out, but the bottom line is that sometimes you have a situation where people might agree with with a counselor on many issues and vote for them, but not on every issue. And one issue is very important to them. And rather than going to the polls as a one issue voter, you can do something like this, which makes a lot more sense to me. I can even think of counselors who I personally agree with on pretty much everything besides one thing. And I think allowing those residents to speak up about that one issue is an appropriate and important check on the council. And I also hear like moving to a representative government. I feel like we've had a representative government and now maybe we have a more representative government, but like representative town meeting and representative town council, I don't completely understand the statement of we move to a representative government, given that theoretically both forms of governments are considered representative, and any representative form of government, in my mind at least, should have a proper check that it is appropriate for the community to serve as that check and balance on the council if they feel the council's gone too far. Andy and then Bernie. You're muted.
I think the first two of these, 8.1 and 8.2, are, you know, saying, hey, you know, pay attention. You know, there's an issue that we feel you should be talking to us about. And I think that's a certain kind of a check. 3 and 4 are more in the realm of forcing the council to do things that they, or overturning things that they've done. And basically what that is asking to the government to do is to ensure that that the council is responding to what the majority of the citizens want. And so the danger is if you lower the threshold that you end up giving a provision for a minority of the citizens to try to overturn, you know, something that they don't like. But the reason that you have these higher thresholds for the heavier you know, second guessing of the representatives is that you're going to require it to go to a vote of the town and ultimately, and that you need to have it needs to be a serious enough thing that a majority of the townspeople are going to agree with the petitioners. So just lowering the number to require, you know, a vote of all the townspeople might just make for more activity, but it doesn't necessarily make for, you know, a greater level of a greater likelihood of approval by the majority of the townspeople.
Bernie?
Yeah, couple of things. One more time, section 8.3, 8.4, and by extension 8.5 parallel what state law is and what the Attorney General will accept. I believe the 5% figure is also the figure that's used in terms of state law and states placing an initiative petition on the ballot. So I wouldn't want to tinker with those provisions because the chance of them changing is slim to is essentially non-existent. You're asking, you'd be asking the legislature, the Attorney General, to establish a Free People's Republic of Amherst. They're not going to do that. The other thing is the town meeting wasn't. Amherst is sort of a strange view of town meeting. Town meeting was a caucus. It didn't. It came together at the call of the select board, and it dissolved when its meetings were held. It didn't go on in between. The town council, is an ongoing government, at least for a 2-year period, and then the membership can change. But it is an ongoing government, and it can set some rules for itself that and act in ways that town meeting couldn't. So town meeting was representative only in as much as people showed up. It wasn't representative as opposed to the kind of government we have. The kind of government we have now. It was a caucus, and I think we need to keep. Town meeting's gone. There's been no major outcry to bring it back like there was in Palmer. I think a couple other towns when they switched over to a council manager form of government. And I think we need to be careful that, when you see numbers like this, before you say, well, we should change it, we need to understand where it sits in terms of state law and whether that means asking council or asking the Collins Center at some point. So I wouldn't. And Andy's correct. I mean, the 8182 is, hey, counselors, pay attention. We need to have you pay attention to these 3 and 4, which are conditioned by Section 5, are much more serious stuff. And again, they parallel what's in state law and state process.
Marcus and then Erica.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify from Bernie, by counsel, when you said asking counsel, you meant asking the lawyer, correct?
I have a bad habit because I've managed towns, not cities, of referring to counsel as the lawyer. So
yeah,
I just
wanted to make sure we were clear because I
Yeah.
think we have people taking notes. So
Thank you for that.
Erica?
Yeah, I was interested to consult Collins about this because I take it that these are some of their annotations. I don't know whether they often add a note when something falls out of the norm or well within, in any case. And the 5% threshold as an example, those things which fall inside or outside of the norm of state law would be interesting to know when it comes to these sections. And Bernie, I think you're making a point that to your view, they fall well within the state norm, and that does that then mean that this is not something that could be changed? Those are sort of two separate questions I'd be interested in pursuing at another point.
Okay, I have one more comment, which is just like 5%, that number changes every time we have an election. So state law makes laws for the entire state. which not most communities in the state do not have a population of 30,000 people that move into and out of town September through May. And many of those people who vote, especially in federal elections, and rightfully do, and have the right to. But just because state law does something, it doesn't mean that we as a community, we may have different needs than what state law prescribes, because state law prescribes communities that don't have those types of differences. And that's sort of what the charter's there for, in my mind. The other issue I was going to raise was just, it says within 14 days here on section 8.4, excuse me. And I just wonder if that should be raised to like a month, maybe 30 days, because 14 days seems like an awful short amount of time for someone to get a coalition started. Like with the amount of signatures needed here, you would have to get a group of 5 or 10 people to get together and start collecting signatures and do this work. It takes me 14 days to get a group of 5 or 10 friends to get together. I mean, this, I feel like we would at least need to give them a month, to give them maybe 15 days to get people together, and then another 15 days to go out and do the work. Marcus?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, across the state, what percentage of populations are students, right? We aren't the only town or city in the state with a college or multiple colleges. In fact, we've only got 5 colleges, well, not even that, 3 in town, whereas others have a lot more. So what is the kind of the population? I understand, yes, these are students coming in, but students use facilities. I mean, they drive on our roads, they use many different functions of the town. Are they just non-citizens because they kind of go wherever? I mean, we have plenty of people that live in town that summer, at other places, or winter at other places too. Are they non-citizens? They're about the same, by the same corollary. Oh man, English is not my first language, but this sort of thing. I mean, when we start picking out people by whatever, we start creating problems, and there's something that kind of, let's say, grinds my gears about all this. If you're a registered voter, you're a registered voter. If you're willing to vote in the town that you're at that given point in time, whether it's a federal election or a local election, I mean, every single place in the whole of the United States has a vast difference between federal election turnout and local election turnout. In the whole world, it's the same way. So we can't really be worrying about that much. They are registered voters, and during their term of registration in our town, they are here.
Andy?
Yeah, I think that once somebody registers to vote, they don't just go off the rolls, the next year, whether it's a local election or not. So I'm not sure there's that much fluctuation year to year in terms of how many registered voters there actually are on the rolls. It may just be some of those don't show up at the polls for local stuff as much as they do, for the federal or state elections. But I don't know that that's the case, but I think it's certainly something we could find out.
Yeah, thank you. I would just say this says 5% of the total number of registered voters as of the date of the most recent town election. So that means that regardless, students or not, etc., the goalpost changes based on luck of the draw.
No, I think my point is that a student who registered the year before would still be would most likely still be registered even if they're not voting in the town election.
They may be, but they may only register for the purpose of voting in the federal election. So you see how that still sets a different goalpost each year or each election cycle, Bernie?
There's always a roll-off, and usually a steep one, from federal elections to state elections to local elections. There's always roll-off. What this basically says is if you have 1,000 people registered to vote at the time of the last election, then that's the number of registered voters you have. You can find towns on the Cape, you can find towns in the Berkshires, where the population fluctuates quite a bit, and it's not due to students, it's due to people who own other homes. So the idea here is to have a uniform statewide standard that everyone can point to. And when you start to carve out, people are not willing, and people will likely say it's unfair to carve out exceptions when other communities face the same challenges. So you know, the 5% is pretty much, at least from what I know, and I could be wrong because that happens at least twice a year. The 5% is a standard that the Commonwealth uses to ensure fair play across the board. So I think I'm really not interested in arguing the uniqueness of Amherst because of students, because there are towns across the Commonwealth that have different population situations depending on the calendar, depending on the school year, you know, depending on agricultural cycles at one point or another. So let's just accept the fact that the Commonwealth says 5%. There are other statutes, state statutes, that have other kinds of actions and that require even higher percentages. So this is pretty much a norm, and I would just let it go with that.
Erica?
I think that the question about 5% is whether or not it's the important question is whether it's 5% of registered voters or 5% of the people who voted in the last election, which are two very different numbers, I would imagine. And that if it was on the last election, then Julian, I would really take your point that probably the numbers would fluctuate wildly from one election cycle to another. If it's 5% of registered voters, I would expect to see like a lot less fluctuation from one election to another. It might change over longer arcs, but probably not for one election to another. In any case, that's a question for, again, this is like a research question, point of comparison. Let's ask Collins and we can figure out if we're outside the norm, if we're even allowed to tinker with this number, whether it's about a student population or not. I think it's an important distinction to know. It's like the 5% of what. The other thing I want to just point out is that there's other differences here that are interesting to me to find out more about, which have to do with, for instance, in 8.3, it specifically talks about physical signatures, and we had raised earlier the idea of like, does it specify electronic signatures or petitions or mechanisms are possible or not? Here it's very specified, in other places it isn't. That seems like an inconsistency that could be resolved if we have clarity from the state level, whether we have room to move there.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. It says here 5% of the registered voters as of the date of the most recent town election. So it's
right, which is different than how many voted. It's just how many were registered to vote
for that election.
Correct?
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah, the distinction between turnout and registration is the important thing here. I think once somebody's registered here, I think the number of registered voters does not vary that much from year to year. The turnout, people who actually voted, does fluctuate. But I think all that part about the registered as of the last local election is just putting a I'm not sure what I'm seeing here, but we're not looking at the, why are we,
Oh, sorry.
The point about the, as of the date of the most recent local elections, is taking a time to take a measurement. So you can say what's 5%, but the turnout is different from the registration numbers, which I don't believe fluctuate as much, nearly as much.
All right. Any other comments, questions on 8.3, 8.4? No? Okay. 8.5. Comments about this?
I think it's interesting that the Collins didn't flag any of these or suggest any additional ones. Right? If you go to the top of that section, Julian, they just say basically like this is the section.
I mean, yeah, I just say I feel like the amount of exceptions here, like it goes through K in exceptions. Like it basically is saying we can't have a check and balance on the town budget as a whole, votes for borrowing money, or votes that are less than 1% of the annual budget of a town, or votes for debt service, or votes to implement a contract or collective bargaining agreement. I mean, it seems to me like basically this is saying, yes, you can have a voter veto position, but not about where your taxes go. That doesn't make much sense to me at all, quite frankly, from an economic democracy perspective. But I don't know
again, I
who
mean,
has
the fact,
on
yeah,
this.
I would just say like the lack of input from the Collins would suggest that this is not out of the ordinary, right? I mean, the ineligible matters being the budget as a whole kind of gets to the lack of participatory budgeting, right, which is on the books for us through the state and is not being taken up. So maybe until that is being taken up, this is the, you know, the way it is. Maybe it's something we flag to say if the budgeting goes, if the participatory budgeting goes through, then we can start thinking about removing these roadblocks. But I think it's probably just reflects the state law. Something to ask, Colin.
Bernie?
It does reflect state law, and I'm not even sure. I'm not sure. I think it probably might even reflect a little bit of the state constitution. It doesn't say you can't vote. You know, it basically says you can't stop the town from paying its debts. You can't stop a temporary borrowing of money in anticipation of revenue, because towns do that routinely to keep the cash flow going. So some of this is very practical. This is all embedded in state law. I know I'm getting to be like just droning on about this stuff, but we have to pay attention to what the black letter of the law says, or what court cases say. We can't just say, well, we're Amherst. Participatory budgeting wouldn't change any of this, because participatory budgeting usually involves having citizens make decisions about a portion of the budget, not the budget as a whole, but portions of the budget. And it's usually communities carve off a certain amount of money and compile a citizens committee to help direct the expenditure of that. The last thing you want is 5,000 plus voters writing a budget. It ain't going to happen. The budget ain't going to happen. There's a reason why you have a representative government and you trust the council and its employees, town manager and staff to do the budget is there's lots of fine print, lots of footnotes, and lots of concerns. You don't do that by vote. So again, this is pretty standard. I think Marcus has read a target. This is pretty much standard stuff out of statutes.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm not surprised the Collins Center didn't question any of this because it was language they provided to us when we were doing the Charter Commission, and for the reasons that are listed at the top. I don't know if you could scroll up a little bit, Julie. Yeah. That basically you don't want the town voting to not pay its debts, and you don't want, there were certain things that were seen as disruptive enough that they would hamper predictability in government and the ability to function on a day-to-day basis. So my recollection, lo these many years later, is that these were fairly standard things to say, that you can't have the whole budget process happen and the budget be approved and then June 15th have the thing thrown into chaos. So there's a process that we can look at as far as how the budget gets created and how it gets approved. But once it's been approved, or once borrowing is scheduled, or second guessing small amounts of the budget, by a voter veto involving a vote of the townspeople, it was seen as something that would not allow this form of government to be functional.
Okay. Other comments, questions about 8.5, Erica?
Yeah. Even if some of these things are boilerplate state law exclusions, I do think that it's just worth mentioning that there are some ways in which a lack of transparency could inhibit participation by the public in some of these decisions. Just as an example, the appropriation of funds to implement a contract. Of course, you can't have petitions popping up to or vetoes popping up to vote on every contract, or to kind of rescind a vote, or to recall a vote in every situation. However, to my mind, the lack of transparency about some of the other parts of the process that get to the point where the contract is about to be implemented, or where the budget is about to be voted on, that create a situation where people occasionally feel like they resort to a petition or a desire for a veto process. So it's not necessarily that these exclusions are inappropriate, but I think it's worth reflecting on what kinds of transparency is there into the budget process, the contracting process, or the other sorts of appointment process that we're looking at in other parts of the charter, that make it so people use mechanisms like a voter veto or a petition as a kind of last resort.
Sorry. Thank you, Erica. I hear what people are saying. It seems like in a slightly broader sense, again, we have checks and balances, and this is designed to be a check on the decisions of the town council and the manager that the voters have. And I feel like having a through K list of limits on how the voters can check the council is sort of inappropriate, especially like people ask, oh, why do we spend money on this? Even if that's less than 1% of the town budget. Town budget's $100 million. That's still $1 million, some of this is, when I look here at any proceedings providing for the submission or referral of a matter to the voters in an election, any proceedings repealing or rescinding a measure. I mean, like, some of these things do make sense, but you have to ask yourself, especially with some of these budgetary things, like, obviously we don't want to have the entire town budget disrupted, but if voters see something that's $1 million that they say, yikes, that seems a bit too expensive, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to be able to go out and collect signatures and say, no, we don't want to pay that tab as a community. And especially in a time when people are looking into the budget, people are asking questions about where the money goes. There's a crisis in the schools. Public Works is one of the lowest funded in the state. Like, that's where some of that money could be going. I think that not allowing the voters to have any say in that, just because it's ordinary, doesn't make it right. Marcus?
Yeah, I was just kind of gonna say maybe this is more of just a list of, hey, like, don't waste your time, right? You can put in the petitions, but these things are off the table per a higher power, not just from us, right? You know, the state won't allow it. Some other entity won't allow whatever you're talking about. I understand there's a lot, but I just feel that it's more of a heads up, right? As we're reading this. Otherwise, people are going to spend the time, because what we're talking about is, especially for voter veto and for the initiative measures, that's a lot of effort that's going to go into those activities that would then turn around and be told, well, no, actually, you can't even go here. It's more of a heads up to me.
I don't know exactly what state law is, quite frankly. It may be, but I'd have to ask a lawyer. I don't think any of us are lawyers. And yeah, Erica, I'll ask Colin.
Yeah, I do think it would be good to have their insight. But I was going to just point out, the way I read this, the exclusion is not to say the public cannot have any say or any petition activity or raise an initiative or referendum of some kind against anything having to do with the budget. I see this as you cannot raise a petition to stop the town budget as a whole, as it spells out in section C. I don't see anything excluding a petition or an initiative against some section of the budget or some particular expense line of expense, right? Anything between 1% and the town budget as a whole seems to me available for public sort of action as deliberated in the other sections of Article 8. I see this as a stopgap to, we've gone through an entire budget process and a last minute, the whole budget cannot be stopped by these mechanisms that have been outlined, but not to say there can be no public check on any subsection of the budget by other means. That's how I'm reading it. But again, it's clear from our conversation that we need some legal expertise and some comment on the difference between state law and local, where we have parameters we can stretch or not.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when you combine the town budget as a whole with the votes with D, E, F, G, I mean, that probably amounts to a pretty large portion of the town budget that people can't touch. I don't know exactly what percentage, but if you consider that 90% of the budget is already put into contracts and collective bargaining agreements, which is basically payment of staff and debt service, and that sort of borrowing, that sort of thing, right? Given that, like, that's already a pretty sizable percentage of the budget, right? That people can't touch. And I mean, like, then combine that with 1%. 1% of the town budget is $1 million. $1 million is still a lot of money. Anyway, other comments on this section? No? Okay. Submissions of matters, other matters to vote. Okay, any questions about 8.6, 8.7? Seeing none, those are short little articles. We'll move on to Article 9. Any comments about Article 8 as a whole? Raphael?
Is someone taking minutes?
Oh, wow, whoops,
Yeah.
my bad. I did not call out a minute taker. I will check on that and email.
Great.
Who's
Thanks.
take minutes. But the recording will be posted, so that can be done.
Great.
My apologies. I should have commented that at the beginning, but I will check, make that person aware, and send them a link to the recording when it's posted. Standard legal language. Okay. Any comments on 9.1? 9.2? No. 9.3? No. 9.4? No. 9.5? This was debated at the way beginning of the council with Andrew Steinberg, I believe. 9.6, that is what we're doing right now. I feel like it may be worth making it a little bit more often, maybe every 7 years.
So yeah, actually, I kind of had that. I mean, it says do it every 4 years. I mean, every year ending in 4, so every 10 years. But if the process takes 2 years, effectively we're doing it every 6 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, oh no, actually, my maths is really, really bad there. But you
Not
know,
exactly,
it's
because every year
yeah.
ending in 4, so it just recycled.
Yeah, but it does shorten the time frame just because of the length of time it takes.
Erica?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that we have received different kinds of feedback about the cadence of this process and that we should make sure we take that in when we, in our feedback about this section, that it's not quite enough. 10 years doesn't seem like quite enough of a review period to the comments that I've heard so far. Also, I just want to say, sort of lightly because it's not appropriate for right now, but that I think it would be useful and interesting for this committee to spend some time in our final reporting to comment on this process and what it actually has been like to form a committee to create a charter review, what the process has been like, how it could be improved, what parts of it should actually be delineated, maybe the composition of the committee, maybe the budgeting. And we can I just think we should reserve a discussion about this section and what it includes for the end of our process.
Awesome. Thank you. I agree. Other comments, questions about 9.6? No. Okay, 9.7. This has yet to be done. But I think it will be interesting to see how it goes when it's done. Comments about this?
This was, the periodic review of the bylaws was done in 2018 and 2019 by yours truly and others.
Oh, awesome.
As a start. Now, we also left the council with a list of recommendations, and I don't know that anyone has followed up to see that those recommendations were acted on. Not that they were necessarily good ones, but they were recommendations. What this suggests is that after any amendment to the charter takes place, there should be a review of the bylaws. I would want to see the bylaws reviewed on a regular basis, simply because one of the things we did was we made simple change we did. We made one of the things we made them all gender neutral.
Hmm.
To catch up with language. We made a number of changes in how bylaws are enforced. Introduced non-criminal disposition into a number of the bylaws, which is a much more effective way for the town to enforce them. And that's the kind of thing that I think should happen on a regular basis anyway. And this seems to peg a 10-year cycle, which would be fine. So one of the things we may wish to do to the council is say, you need to get a committee together to review the bylaws following our report. And just emphasize this section.
Yeah, thank you so much for that context, Bernie. I had thought since 2026 would be the year it was done again that it hadn't happened, but I'm really glad that you all worked on that, and it seems pretty interesting. So thanks for that context. Other questions about this section? No?
I was just noticing the Collins comment about interim bylaw reviews. I don't know if your comment speaks to that, Bernie, but I don't know if you were suggesting a kind of more of a rolling process or a different kind of calendar.
No, I was just, I would just suggest, and I think we can take it from the charter as it exists, and just remind the council that every 10 years is probably a good period of time to review the bylaws, make sure they're current with Massachusetts law, make sure that the language in the bylaws are clear and appropriate. Do some fine tuning. So the council can ask for a review of the bylaws anytime it chooses, but I would like to have it pegged so that we don't do what we don't have to confront what we confronted in 2018 and 2019, which was decades of mishmash.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Other comments, questions on the section before I move us along? No? Okay. 9.8. Questions about 9.8? There's a slight comment here.
This is one of those. I mean, this is basically follow the Mass General Law.
Yeah.
So usually when you see that the first sentence, there should be a master plan containing the plan elements described in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81D. It's missing those magic words, as amended. This is one of those sections that I'm wondering about, because the master plan is really the planning board. Amherst, to its credit, takes its master plan very seriously. Other communities, number of other communities just have one because you need one for state grants. So, I mean, the only thing I would do is wherever the statute is referenced in the charter, I would add the words "as amended" after it, so that you don't have to go back through and change the charter when the state law changes.
Yeah, I agree. Master plan is very detailed. Andy?
Yeah, I appreciate that as amended idea. That makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to say that during the goal of this was to make sure that that councils and the people in town were paying attention to the master plan. As Bernie said, there's a lot of master plans that a planning board does it sits on a shelf somewhere. But I think in our deliberations, we felt that it was important that the idea of having a master plan was important for the town, and that we should encourage actions to be consistent with that.
Great. Other comments, questions on this section? No? Okay. 9.9, any comments? This is, to be clear, not the section limiting employees from running for council. This is just the limitation on an employee not being able to work 2 full-time jobs or conflicting hours for the town on the same table.
It's state law.
That makes sense. Certification, any questions on 9.10 or 9.11? I guess I had one question on 9.11, which is just, is this barring people convicted of a felony crime from running for town council in the future? Or just saying if they commit a crime while in office, that they're kicked off of the council until the next election cycle?
It's a good question.
It does say while holding office.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, what's the difference? I mean, if you're convicted of I guess you've done your time.
And said eligibility. One is an
Yeah.
eligibility question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I assume it means that they would be allowed to run, but it's worth considering.
Well, if you have 34 felony convictions in the state of New York,
Then you're eligible for anything.
yeah,
Andy?
Yeah, this just says that if you're convicted of a felony while in office, you relinquish the office. If the voters decide that they want to put you back in that office in the next election, that's their prerogative.
Mm.
Which is concerning for the reasons Bernie stated. 9.12. Any comments on this? Erica?
The section that they're calling attention to having to do with the period of public comment for all of the multiple member bodies may promulgate rules that regulate the period of public comment. I'm looking at section B. I think is all of the sections relating to the rules of around public comment are worthy of our close attention, given everything we're hearing.
Yeah, Bernie?
just as a by the way, the open meeting law does not require a period of public comment. So what Amherst has done here by including it in the charter is to be proactive and ensure that there is a public comment meeting, public comment period before, or as part of every meeting.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. This feels important to have and allow for public comment during all the meetings. My only other question was about vacancies. To be published on the town bulletin board for a period of not less than 14 days. Again, I feel like, you know, we've talked about this in terms of municipal employees, but also in terms of multiple member bodies. Does that 14-day window prevent us from appointing the right person? I guess it's a little bit different because we're not in sort of as competitive of an environment, but still worth our consideration. Comments on
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Julian. I think it would be nice to keep it consistent, right?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bernie?
Yeah, having listened to the discussion at the last meeting, I think the 14 days is probably a holdover from the good old days when it took time to put stuff up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where. I couldn't find any written justification anywhere for a 14-day period. That doesn't mean that you can't start interviewing the day the posting goes up. It doesn't mean that you can't make a decision soon after the posting for any position comes down. I think the HR staff are critical here to understand what state and federal law around employment requires.
Which makes sense. Okay, section, any questions on 9.13, 9.14? Yeah, okay. Would we like to discuss our transition provisions, or would we like to close off the meeting 2 minutes early?
I think my vote would be to hold that part of the discussion.
Okay, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to vote to remove it anyway, but holding it's great. So
Okay, great. We'll have a short discussion on this at the next meeting as well. Any items for future agenda planning? Topics not anticipated? Okay, I'll move to adjourn.
Here.
Oh, sorry, Amy.
I think we should, I don't know if it's the next meeting, but I think soon we should have a discussion about how we're going to decide, you know, how we're going to make decisions about what's in and what's out of the, you know, the list of changes. You know, so just,
Yeah,
we're going
absolutely.
to have a long list of things that we're going to be going through, and we're going to have different opinions on them, and how are we going to decide?
I can put on the next agenda, no problem. Other comments for 11 and 12? No? Oh, yeah.
sorry, yeah, I just remembering back to Meg's comments from previous. Did we talk about a budget for this committee, an ongoing budget?
No, we did not.
Can we bring that up the next time, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Great. Myself, I'm an I. Andy?
Aye.
Erica?
Aye.
Marcus?
Aye.
Bernie?
Aye.
Raphael?
Aye.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.